Boldwood presents Hell and Ice, written by Andrew Warren and read by Jeff Harding. Forward. The events of Hell and Ice take place before Tokyo Black, when Caine is hiding off the grid in Pattaya, Thailand. Part 1. Devil's Due. Chapter 1. The tiny grill spat grease and smoke into the tropical air. Its blackened metal rods were covered by a thick charred crust, the petrified remains of previous meals. But the smell emanating from the strips of meat cooking on its surface was mouthwatering. From the shore, Sarah leaned over the wooden railing of the narrow walkway and waved to get the attention of the tiny Thai woman working the grill. The grill was set up on a small boat, one of several that were docked in the muddy waters of a shallow canal that crossed through the Pattaya floating market. The market was a popular tourist attraction, and a bustling crowd of people shifted around her. As Sarah waited for the woman, she caught a glimpse of an older man wearing cargo shorts and a Hawaiian shirt that looked one size too small. He was eyeing her legs as she leaned over the railing. Her slim, lean body was tanned from weeks of travel, and she knew the tiny cutoffs and faded tank top she was wearing did little to conceal it. She was grateful she had kept her tan, despite the cloudy gray skies that loomed over the marketplace. She had arrived in Thailand 2 weeks ago, and in that time the sun had barely peeked out from behind the thick, gloomy curtain. She ignored the lecherous man, and soon he disappeared into the crowd. She waved to the old woman again and finally caught her attention as she handed a styrofoam plate of food to another tourist. The woman's face was dark and lined with wrinkles. A green embroidered shawl was draped over her working clothes.
60 baht! 60 baht!
The old woman chanted. Sarah did some rapid currency conversions in her head. 2 plates of food would cost her about €3, which would just about buy her a can of soda back in Germany. She held up 2 fingers. The old woman nodded and prepared 2 plates for her. Each plate was stacked with rice, a small cup of cucumber salad, and 3 skewers of the sizzling meat. Sarah handed the woman 6 20-baht notes and a 10-baht coin.
Keep the change.
The old woman smiled and nodded and slid the plates over the railing to her. Sarah inhaled deeply. The meat smelled delicious, but she couldn't quite identify what it was.
Chicken satay?
She asked. The woman shook her head.
Charakaika!
Sarah had no idea what that meant, but she knew the proper response when ordering food in Thailand. She smiled and said,
Aroy!
Delicious. She grabbed the 2 plates and continued down the wooden walkway of the market. To her right, the long strip of water wound its way between the 2 sides of the market. The canal was crossed by several arched wooden bridges. Crowds of tourists made their way across each bridge, usually stopping in the middle to take pictures of the boats in the water below. The canal was man-made, and the water was a dark muddy brown. Its dull, flat surface only served to highlight the explosion of colorful fruits, seafood, silks, and other goods that filled every boat and stall in the market. Sarah took a deep breath as she absorbed the sights and sounds around her. She felt alive, the most alive she'd felt since finishing university. The idea of returning home, of finding a job in some law office in Hamburg, filing papers and reading court documents, seemed like just another cloud on a distant horizon. What kind of life was that, compared to what she had experienced in these months of travel? The warm tropical climate, the thrill of new people, new places, and most of all, new possibilities. At that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that this was the life she wanted. Her train of thought was suddenly interrupted as she felt a hand squeeze her ass through her torn cut-off shorts. She shrieked and spun around, dropping one of the plates of food in the process. Remembering the leering old man in the Hawaiian shirt, she raised her hand and prepared to deliver a strong slap to whoever had groped her. She looked up and lifted her sunglasses off her face. She was staring into the warm brown eyes of Gunther, her university mate and traveling partner.
After last night,
She thought,
Gunther is quite a bit more than just a mate. Arschloch!
She screamed in German, beating his tan chest with her tiny fist.
You scared me.
Gunther was shirtless, and his skin still held a golden tan. A black tribal tattoo snaked around the lean athletic muscles of his right arm, and a shell necklace hung from his neck. Sarah watched the muscles move beneath his skin as he threw back his head and laughed. She found herself thinking more about the previous night. That feeling of being alive, of infinite possibilities on the horizon. Gunther was part of those possibilities now, too. She couldn't deny she was hungry for a repeat performance of their intimate physical gymnastics. Liebling, if you haven't relaxed by now, what am I going to do with you when we go someplace really crazy? He asked. She let her fingers linger on his chest.
I know. Sorry, this pervert was stalking me before. Just got me on edge, I guess.
Gunther looked deep into her blue eyes and brushed a wisp of blonde hair from her face. Well, who could blame him, eh? I was getting an eyeful of you myself. You know I love those little shorts. She laughed.
But look what you made me do.
She pointed to the spilled food on the ground.
That's your lunch down there. Enjoy.
She scooped some rice into her mouth with chopsticks. Gunther reached for her plate, but she turned her back on him.
Oh no, you clean up your mess first.
Gunther grabbed the plastic plate off the ground and used it to scrape the fallen mess of food off the walkway and into the canal. A school of tiny black fish darted to the surface and nibbled at the morsels as they sank into the water. He tossed the plate in a garbage can, and the two walked through the market. Gunther threw his arm around her shoulders and grabbed a piece of meat off her plate. He popped it in his mouth and chewed. It's good, he said. His words slurred as he continued to grind the meat between his teeth. What is it? Sarah shrugged.
Chicken satay, I think. I got it from one of the boats. The woman who served me called it jarakai.
Gunther swallowed and scanned the market stalls. Jarakai, huh? I think I need a beer.
A beer? Now? Why?
Because jarakai means crocodile, and in Thailand one does not eat crocodile without a cold Singer beer. Sarah laughed.
Oh, that's a rule, yeah?
It is now. Gunther's rule on eating crocodile in Thailand with a beautiful girl. Sarah leaned into him and kissed his cheek.
I like this rule. Let's go.
They shared the plate of food as they walked arm in arm through the market. Gunther spotted a small stall that was selling beer from a cooler, and he broke off. Be right back. Don't eat all the crocodile without me. Sarah watched him waiting in line at the food stall. His legs were lean and strong, the result of months spent surfing and hiking around the world. She looked up at the cloudy sky and decided that once they left the market, they would be spending the rest of the day in their bungalow by the beach. They could go sightseeing again tomorrow. After all, there were infinite possibilities on the horizon. What would it hurt to spend one more day in bed, satisfying their passions? She heard the high-pitched sound of a child crying. Spinning around, she saw a little Thai girl, no more than 5 or 6 years old, stumbling through the crowd. Her simple tan dress with blue and pink stripes looked handcrafted.
Maybe her mother is working on one of the boats, and she wandered off,
Sarah thought. No one was stopping to help. The crowd simply pushed past, oblivious to the crying child. Sarah tossed the remaining food in a garbage can and walked over to the girl. Kneeling in front of the child, she put a reassuring hand on her shoulder.
Hey, it's okay. Are you all right?
The girl looked at her with small, deep brown eyes. Her mouth seemed to struggle to form words. Sarah pulled a napkin from her pocket and brushed the tears from the girl's puffy cheeks.
There you go. Are you lost?
Sarah saw a flash of movement over the girl's shoulder. She looked up and saw the old man, the one who had been leering at her earlier, moving across a bridge toward them. Sarah knew that in addition to the beauty and energy that she thrived on, Pattaya had a dark side. Prostitution and sex tourism were common. If one was seeking perversions, anything imaginable could be found in the city's dark alleys and seedy bordellos. For a price, of course. Was that why the girl was crying? Was this pervert in a Hawaiian shirt chasing her? She took the little girl's hand and stood up.
Come on,
She said.
I know someone who can help.
The girl continued crying, but dutifully followed along, her little legs moving as fast as she could to keep up with Sarah. The two made their way back to the food stall. Gunther smiled as he walked toward them, taking a long swig of beer from a frosted Singa bottle. "Who's this, then?" He smiled at the girl, and for the first time she stopped crying. Sarah melted, knowing how reassuring she found that smile herself.
I found her crying over there.
She pointed toward the bridge. The man in the Hawaiian shirt was there, rummaging through a box of seashells perched on a rickety souvenir cart.
That's the guy I told you about, the one who was stalking me. I think he was following her,
Sarah said in a hushed whisper. Gunther looked down and spoke to the girl in broken Thai. "My, you lost your mother?" The girl stared at him in silence. Gunther spoke a few more words to her, but it was clear she could not understand him.
What do we do?
Sarah asked.
We can't just leave her here.
"Excuse me, I help you?" a sing-song male voice asked. Sarah and Gunther turned to see an older Thai man standing next to them. He was tall for a local and looked like he was in his 40s. His navy blue polo shirt and khaki shorts looked crisp and brand new, and his body was lean and athletic. He was carrying a large canvas duffel bag that was slung over his shoulder on a leather strap. Above his dark brown eyes, his brow was furrowed in concern. "Heard little one crying. She lost?" Sarah looked the man up and down. She turned to look at the Westerner in the Hawaiian shirt, but he was nowhere to be seen. "Yeah, man, we think some pervert dude was stalking her," Gunther said. "She looks scared." The older man kneeled in front of the little girl and spoke to her in Thai. Sarah couldn't understand what he was saying, but the tone of his words sounded reassuring. The little girl stared at him with wide eyes and nodded. She continued to grasp Sarah's hand. The man reached into the pocket of his shorts and pulled out a small plastic bag of dried fruit. He opened the bag and held it out to the girl. She gingerly reached in, grabbed one of the fruits, and stuffed it in her mouth. The man looked up at Sarah. "Dried plums. They my favorite when I was her age. Tastes like candy." He grunted, stood up, and dusted off his knees. "She too scared to speak, but she must be lost. There's a police box at the end of the market. I take her there. They find parents." He reached his hand toward the girl and spoke to her again in Thai. "Ma gab from na. Come, little one." The girl looked up at Sarah. She looked back at the man, shook her head, and shuffled behind Sarah's legs.
Look, she's scared. She doesn't want to go,
Sarah said.
"Let's just call the police and they can meet us here."
Gunther gave Sarah a condescending look. "Babe, come on. You want to wait here all day for the police?" Sarah stared daggers at Gunther, then turned to the older man.
"No offense, sir, but we don't know who you are, and she doesn't seem to want to go with you."
Sarah saw a ripple of anger cross the man's features. He seemed about to speak, but then hesitated. He nodded. Yes, of course, you're right. Sorry, I just want to help the child. Tell you what, I go to the police. Bring them back here." He lowered his duffel bag to the ground. "You wait here with child. Watch my bag, okay? Very heavy. I'll be right back." The man wandered off down the market. Within a few seconds, he was lost in the shifting crowd of tourists and vendors hawking their wares. Gunther pursed his lips and uttered a low whistle. "Okay, that was a little odd." Sarah shook her head.
"I don't know. I don't see the Hawaiian shirt guy anymore, and something about that other guy was weird."
Gunther laughed. "Geez, babe, don't be so paranoid. You don't trust anybody." She looked down at the child, who returned her gaze with wide eyes. She lowered her voice.
"Okay, then why did he leave his bag? They say you're never supposed to take a stranger's bag. What if it's full of drugs?"
Gunther hefted the bag off the ground. Well, if it is, we hit the jackpot, 'cause this thing weighs a ton.
That's not funny.
Come on, let's check it out. Gunther pushed through the crowd and walked to the side of the market, where the constant stream of people thinned out to a low trickle. Sarah and the child followed, hand in hand.
Gunther, I don't like this. Do you know what the sentence here is for drugs?
Gunther turned his back to the crowd. Keep your voice down, he hissed. He unzipped the bag. The little girl began to cry again, and her face turned bright red. Sarah pressed up against Gunther to peer over his shoulder.
Well, what is it?
Just a second. Can you quiet her down? Gunther rummaged through the bag, pulling out a bundle of cheap T-shirts. It's just stupid T-shirts, tourist stuff. Oh, fuck. Kneeling, he gingerly set the bag on the ground. Sarah caught a glimpse of electrical wires and 2 large clear cylinders taped together. Each cylinder was filled with a yellowish crumbled powder. A red LED light attached to one of the wires was flashing.
What the hell is...
she began, but Gunther grabbed her arm. Sarah, shut up and run! Sarah scooped up the screaming girl and ran. She'd gone only a few steps when suddenly everything she could see, hear, or feel was blotted out in a giant ball of orange fire. She screamed, but the sound was silenced by the explosion. She felt her body moving and had just enough time to realize she was not running. She was flying through the air. Her skin was burning, but she felt no pain. Her eardrums and eyeballs ruptured from the shock wave, and the blood cells in her lungs exploded as her body was torn apart. As the pinpoint of white light that was her consciousness dimmed out, a dying thought flickered through her mind. This was true infinity. Infinite blackness, infinite darkness, infinite possibilities, reduced to an infinity of cold black space. Chapter 2. A light but steady rain washed the grime and residue from the roofs of the go-go clubs and beer bars that lined either side of Soi 6, part of Pattaya's infamous red light district. It was early October, near the end of the rainy season for Thailand. Normally, the afternoon sun would have already heated the air to a stifling 90 degrees or more. Instead, the unending drizzle of rain cooled both the climate and the wallets of visiting tourists. Today, once again, the rain had kept the crowds away. Only a few diehards, old men with beer guts stretching the seams of their cheap local T-shirts, ventured out into the downpour. They meandered through the rivers of filthy water that rushed down either side of the street, occasionally stopping to haggle with bored-looking bar girls. Despite the lack of customers, the girls looked like they would rather go back to painting their nails. The atmosphere in Ruby's Club, a beer bar toward the end of the street, mirrored the gloomy weather outside. Music blasted from the bar's speakers, but it seemed unable to drown out the sound of the falling rain. A beautiful girl dressed in a sexy school uniform danced on the center stage, spinning around a gleaming chrome pole, but the motley assortment of locals and regular customers paid her no attention. The few customers in the place sipped lukewarm glasses of beer from the front patio bar and watched the rain falling into the street with quiet, detached reflection. The sole exception was a lone man standing toward the center of the patio bar. He was average height, but his arms and back rippled with muscle beneath his slim-fitting black linen shirt. Everything about him seemed hard and angular. His hair was buzzed military short and worn in a Caesar cut. His nose was slim and hawk-like. His eyebrows were 2 dark slashes cutting across his forehead. The only soft thing about his face were his eyes. They were large and almond-shaped. Delicate black lashes blinked, revealing bright baby blue irises. His left eye had a lazy tick and seemed to dart and roll toward the edge of his face. He slammed his empty glass down on the counter. The noise echoed through the bar like a gunshot. A few of the regulars looked up in annoyance, but they glanced away after meeting the man's gaze. There was something unnerving about those strange, beautiful eyes set in such a hard face. "Bullshit! More vodka, and no more of this cheap mocha. I want top shelf. Beluga, bitch! The bartender was a stocky, pretty girl whose dark skin and silky black hair were typical of girls from the northwestern Isan region. She hurried over and set another glass down on the counter.
No beluga, sir,
She said with her brightest forced smile.
Stoli okay? Good Russian vodka.
Ah, story is also mocha. All you have is piss here. The bartender's smile flickered.
Stoli okay, sir?
She repeated. The man nodded and looked away as she poured his drink. He turned to another man who was sipping beer from a tall frosted glass a couple chairs down at the bar. He was wearing a white t-shirt, olive green pants, and battered suede desert boots. He was taller and lankier than the Russian, and his body had the lean, taut look of a natural athlete. "What is with this bar, huh?" The Russian grunted. "They call this vodka. Swedish mocha, Finnish mocha, even Russian mocha. All piss, I say." The man down the bar gave no response. He did not look up from his beer. A tall, lighter-skinned bar girl with thick, wavy brown hair sat down on the stool next to the Russian. She wore black hot pants, a black bustier top, and scarlet high heels. She leaned toward the Russian and spoke into his ear, arching her back and making sure to give him a good view of her cleavage in the process.
Hey, mister, you have nice eyes. Buy me drink?
She was stunningly beautiful, and her sudden appearance seemed to improve the Russian's mood. His wide blue eyes drank her in, and she leaned back as his unnerving stare traversed her body. "Sure, baby, I buy you a drink. What's your name?"
I'm Nayana. What your name, mister?
"I'm Alexei Rudolph. Delighted to meet you." He took her hand in his. She let him caress it for a moment, then tried to pull it back. He gripped it tight in his fist. The muscles in his arms bulged. She giggled and tried to play it off.
You strong, baby. Big, strong man.
The bartender set down a drink in front of the girl without asking. It was a lady drink, a tiny bit of alcohol mixed with fruit juice and club soda. Despite its low alcohol content, it cost 150 baht, about twice the cost of a normal drink. Alexei nodded his approval, and the bartender drifted away again. "You have pretty hands," he said, his large meaty paw engulfing her tiny fingers. She laughed as she sipped her drink with her free hand.
You like? She asked. Come upstairs with me. I treat you good. 2,000 baht.
Alexei twisted his lips into a smile. He threw back his head and laughed. Duh. I fucking love Thailand. Drink up, my lovely. I take you back to my hotel room. Long time. 4,000 baht. I want to take my time with a piece of ass this fine. The girl sipped her drink and smiled, but her brow furrowed in concern. Maybe it was the way he gripped her hand, or the unnerving stare, and that lazy floating eye. Something about the man led her to shake her head.
No, baby. I only do short time. 2,000 baht. We go upstairs right now. I make you feel so good.
Short time was bar girl slang for a quickie. A brief shower upstairs, then sex in a somewhat private room that contained little more than a bed, a nightstand, and a box of condoms. Once the client finished, they would go back downstairs, and that was that. Long time would mean an all-night affair, usually at the client's hotel room. Alexei jerked up on her arm, and she gasped as he pulled her to a standing position. Her glass tipped and rolled off the bar. It shattered on the ground as its sweet, sticky contents spilled across the counter. I'm not spending $1,000 a night for a suite at the Hilton so I can fuck in some flea-infested shithole. You come with me. I want to enjoy my time with you. The girl struggled to free her hand from his grasp. She no longer bothered faking a smile, and her eyes were wide with fear.
No, baby. Short time, okay? I only do short time.
Alexei raised his free hand back, and the other patrons in the bar looked away. There was no mistaking the gesture. Everyone knew that whatever happened next, it would be safer not to get involved in yet another drunken brawl over a bar girl. Alexei swung his arm forward in an open-handed slap, but jerked to a stop midway. Someone was holding his arm in a firm grip. It was the man from the end of the bar. The few patrons fished crumpled banknotes from their pockets and meandered away into the rain. A couple slid inside the dark interior of the bar to enjoy the striptease show. Alexei found himself staring into the man's unblinking eyes. They were emerald green and as cold and hard as the gemstones they resembled. His face had the tanned skin and dark stubble of a local, an expat who could no longer bother to shave or slather on sunscreen on a daily basis. There was a slight hollowness to his features, a haunted shadow that hung over his face, beneath his short swept-back brown hair. "You heard the lady. Short time only," the man said. His voice was low, but it cut through the noise of the rain like a steel blade. "There are hundreds of girls working the street, and in weather like this, I'm sure you can have your pick." Alexei stared at the man for a second. "Take your hand off me," he said, enunciating each word. The man removed his hand. Alexei squinted at him. "Who the hell are you? Have we met?" The man looked Alexei in the eye and shook his head. "No, you don't know me." Alexei glared at the man and looked him up and down. The man was known by many names throughout town. Few knew his true identity. In Pattaya, most knew him as Mark Waters, a shady Farang expat with a questionable source of income and an intimidating stare that tended to silence unwanted questions. His real name was Thomas Caine. "Let's drink," Caine said. "This day is shitty enough as it is." He gestured to the bartender, and she hurriedly prepared 2 vodkas on ice. Alexei let go of Nyana. She took a few steps back, but did not leave the bar. "Something about you looks familiar," Alexei said. Caine shook his head. "I said you don't know me. I don't know who you are either, and I don't really care. You want a drink or not?"
Come on, baby,
Nyana pleaded with Alexei.
"Let's go upstairs. We have good time. I lots of fun, you see."
He ignored her. A shadow crossed the bar. Caine looked up and saw a second man step up behind the Russian. He was taller, and his arms and shoulders bulged with thick ropes of muscles beneath a skin-tight black t-shirt. Caine sighed. "Who I am is not so important, I guess," Alexei said. "But please, meet Gregor. Gregor is happy to make your acquaintance, and you will see, he is very important man." The bartender slid the 2 drinks over to Caine and Alexei. Alexei ignored his. Caine picked up his and took a long sip. "Funny, he doesn't look it." Alexei laughed. Gregor took a step forward. "Well, my friend, when the police fish you out of the gutter with a face full of broken teeth, maybe you will change your mind." Alexei threw some bills on the counter. "But please, first enjoy your drink. It's on me." He stormed out of the bar, leaving Gregor behind. The big man cracked his knuckles and stepped toward Caine. Chapter 3. As Gregor moved in to strike, Caine held the base of his glass in his right hand and swung it against the bar. The glass shattered, leaving a pair of jagged, glittering shards attached to the base. Gregor was huge, but he moved like a diesel truck. Caine watched the muscles in his assailant's shoulders compress as the man wound back for a punch. Like a tree felled by a lumberjack, Gregor's massive right arm swung through the air in a powerful blow. But he had telegraphed the direction of the attack. Using a small lightning-fast movement, Caine slid left and stepped inward, closing the gap. The punch sailed past the right side of his head, just missing his face. He kept his right arm up tight against his face as a guard. As Gregor's momentum carried him forward, Caine struck with his left fist, landing 2 quick rabbit punches to the man's right side. With any luck, he thought, I'll bruise the bastard's liver and end the fight quickly. The big man struggled to regain his balance. Caine pivoted and lashed out with the broken glass. The weapon sliced across Gregor's forehead. Nyana, still watching from the sidelines, screamed as a curtain of red blood spilled down the big man's face. Gregor roared in fury. He charged forward, lashing out wildly with his powerful arms, but the blood in his eyes blinded him. Caine ducked under the wild swings, throwing the broken bottle aside. He waited. Waited. At last, Gregor paused, panting from exertion. Caine saw his opening and struck. He punched straight out with his left hand. The jab struck Gregor's chin. Caine winced as he felt the crushing blow against his knuckles, but he didn't slow his assault. He leaped forward, following the punch with a swift right elbow strike. Gregor stumbled backward. He reached up, wiping the blood from his face. His eyes were clear now, and they gleamed at Caine with a hateful stare. Caine threw a right hook, but this time Gregor was ready for him. He blocked the punch with an outside left hand and hooked it around Caine's arm in the process. As Caine struggled to free his arm, the big man sliced him with his elbow, knocking Caine's face left, then right. The power of the 2 blows was immense. Caine stumbled back as Gregor let go of his arm. The force of the second elbow strike had spun him around. He fought to clear the haze in his mind as he felt 2 strong arms wrap around his chest. The grip tightened, and he was heaved into the air. He gasped and coughed as his breath was driven from his lungs. The grip tightened even more, and a red haze fell over his vision. He kicked his feet backward, but they dangled uselessly in the air. He couldn't make contact with Gregor's knees or shins, and even if he could, he doubted he could strike with enough force to make the beast of a man release his hold. Gregor grunted again and ratcheted his arms tighter together. Caine felt the pressure compress his ribs and knew they would crack if the man heaved him up into the air again. He reached out with his arms, struggling to grab something, anything he could use as a weapon against Gregor. His flailing hand felt cold glass and liquid, Alexi's drink. The man had refused to touch it before he had slinked away. Caine grabbed the glass and swung it over his shoulder, striking Gregor's wounded face. Gregor roared in pain. The vodka washed across the bloody gash in his forehead, sending a spasm of stinging pain through the huge man's face. He did not release his grip, but his arms involuntarily flexed as the pain ran through his body. Caine slid down a few inches, and he felt his feet touch the floor. He swung his head backward, and the top of his skull smashed into Gregor's nose. The man uttered something between a groan and a sneeze and dropped Caine. As Caine hit the ground, Gregor stumbled backward a few steps, cradling his broken nose. Rivulets of blood streamed between his fingers. Caine sucked a lungful of breath and spun around, wasting no time in pressing the attack. With Gregor's hands occupied, Caine leaped to his feet and swung his left leg forward in a savage kick to the man's solar plexus. Gregor bent forward, grunting as the kick knocked the wind out of him. Standing over Gregor, Caine grabbed a beer bottle off the bar counter. He swung it straight down, smashing it onto Gregor's skull. The glass exploded, lacerating his fingers and burying tiny sparkling fragments into Gregor's head. Gregor collapsed to the ground like a rag doll. A low groan escaped his lips, and then he was silent, unmoving. Caine stood where he was, panting. I've gotten sloppy, he thought. Stupid. There was no reason for the fight to have gone on as long as it had. No reason for it to have started in the first place. He could have handled it a million different ways. Why had he chosen violence? No, he thought, don't lie to yourself. This is who you are. This is why you can't go home. This is why you had to leave her. Rebecca.
He dead?
Nyana asked in a quiet voice, interrupting Caine's thoughts. He looked at Gregor's body and shook his head. I don't know, but if he's not, he's going to be pissing blood when he wakes up. A stream of Thai profanity erupted from the beautiful girl's mouth. Caine couldn't understand most of it, but obviously she was upset. "Hey, Nyana, just calm down. It'll be—" He held up his hands and noticed the blood streaming from the gashes left by the shattered glass. Sirens howled in the distance. Their mournful wailing grew closer. Caine knew what that meant. The royal police were on their way. He had bribed the police in the past, payoffs to look the other way when he smuggled shipments of counterfeit handbags or stolen iPhones. But a body, a violent altercation, blood— he couldn't take the chance that they might arrest him, even temporarily, and run his prints.
Come, follow me,
Nyana said.
We go out the back.
Caine followed her into the bar. She grabbed a clean towel from the kitchen as she herded him toward the rear service door.
Here, wrap your hand.
Caine nodded and wound the white cloth around the gashes in his hand. The towel was quickly stained a mottled shade of pink as his blood soaked through the rag.
What's wrong with you? You crazy?
Nyana muttered. Something was off about that guy, Caine said. You saw it yourself. That's why you wouldn't go back to his hotel room. The beautiful girl nodded as they turned the corner in the small corridor that led behind the kitchen.
He bad man, I think, but I talk him into short time. We bang, he leave. Now instead, big mess. And where I find another guy in this weather? I got kid to feed, you know.
I know, Nyana. I'm sorry. I was just worried for you. Nyana opened the rear door, and the thick hot air from outside exploded into the corridor. Caine squinted out into the alley that ran behind the bar. It was as devoid of life as the flooded streets out front. Nyana put her hand on his face, and her expression softened.
You are a good man, I know.
Caine shook his head. No, Nyana, I'm not a good man.
You good to me. You look out for me, other girls too. But sometimes, when I look in your eyes—
She hesitated.
Sometimes I see something inside you looking back at me. Something scary.
The sirens outside grew louder. The beautiful girl leaned in close, and her skin smelled of baby oil and jasmine. She kissed his cheek.
You go now. Take care of hand. Stay low for a while. I come see you later, okay?
Caine nodded. Right. He headed out into the rain.
Hey!
Nyana called after him. He turned and saw her leaning in the doorway. Her smile was radiant, and for a second he felt as if the sun had managed to pierce the clouds above with its dazzling rays.
Thank you, she said. You good friend to me.
He waved and started away, quickening his pace. Within a few minutes, the bar, the blood, and the body of the big Russian man were all left in the gloom behind him. Chapter 4. Caine stared out the window of his small, sparse apartment. The place was clean, to the point of being sterile. No art hung on the walls, no pictures of family or loved ones sat on his desk. He never knew if he would have to leave in a hurry, so he kept his furniture and belongings to a minimum. The place felt empty. The building was far enough away from the pedestrian street that the noise of the crowds was usually a distant murmur. But tonight, the only sound he heard was rain pelting the windows and the muddy streets below. He watched the sheets of water run down the cracked pane of glass. The streetlights reflected a halo of red and green circles in the droplets on the window. He thought about what had happened earlier in the day. The fight. The blood. Nyana had said he was a good friend. Caine wasn't sure that was true. He looked back over his past, the things he had done, the lives he had taken, all in the interest of preserving democracy. He suppressed a grim laugh. The interests he had been preserving were those of his handler, a high-level case officer in the CIA. Him and other men like him. They claimed they were acting for the greater good, and Caine had believed them. Over the years, he had seen the cost their vision of the future claimed in blood, a cost they relied on others to pay. Caine had begun to wonder if the price was too high. It had been Rebecca, a woman he had worked with briefly in the CIA, who had awoken something in him, the ability to feel again, the desire to see more in himself, to be more than just a weapon, a blunt instrument sent out to murder. Their affair was brief, but in their time together she had touched him, changed him. But it was that love, that desire to change, that forced him to remove her from his life. Caine was betrayed. To cover up an unsanctioned black op, his handler arranged to have Caine and his partner disappear. Caine saw his partner murdered in cold blood, gunned down by the targets they were sent to eliminate. Caine managed to survive the attack, but suffered through a period of brutal captivity and torture. And when he finally escaped and returned home, he discovered the ultimate betrayal. His country believed that he was the traitor responsible for his partner's murder. He knew that any further contact with Rebecca would only put her in danger. He had brought death to her doorstep. The only way to keep her safe was to allow others to believe him dead. So he disappeared. Caine knew how to survive off the grid. He used his contacts and criminal connections to make a meager living on the outskirts of society. He had been trained to operate invisibly, leaving as little sign of his presence as possible. It wasn't a fulfilling life, but it kept him and those he cared about safe. Deep down, he feared that all the bloodshed, all the pain and suffering he had caused, was a curse. He would never escape it. No matter how far he ran, violence and death were always just a few steps behind him. Now, violence had followed him to Nyana. There was a knock on the door. Caine paced across the studio apartment. He peeled back a small piece of tape that covered the peephole in the door. The tape was a security precaution. It kept people outside from being able to look through and track his movements, watching for him to block the light. Looking through the tiny fisheye lens, he saw Nyana standing in the dark hallway. She cradled a bag of groceries in her arms. He opened the door. "Nyana, you know you don't have to." The beautiful girl rolled her eyes.
Go fuck on. Just let me in.
Caine smiled as she pushed past him and entered the apartment. "Cops give you a hard time?" he asked as he shut the door behind her. "Did the Russians come back?"
Cops come, ask questions. I flirt, they leave, just like always. And you know how many Russians we get in bar? They all the same. Think their money make them kings. I can handle them.
She set the groceries down on the counter and surveyed the room.
You been living here how long? Place always looks empty. You need a plant.
Caine laughed. "Trust me, plants aren't my specialty." Nyana gave him a hug, and Caine winced as her arms brushed against his ribs. She looked him over with concern and wrinkled her nose.
Still sore, huh? You smell like key. You take a hot shower. I cook.
Caine didn't speak much Thai, but he knew the word key. It meant excrement. He locked the door, replaced the tape, and trudged toward the bathroom.
You hungry tonight?
Nyana called from the kitchen. "Starving," Caine shouted back as he stripped off his sweaty shirt and turned on the shower.
Good. I cook lots. Keep you healthy for next time you fight.
Caine stuck his head out the door as he waited for the shower to warm up. "What makes you think there's a next time?" He heard pots and pans clattering in the kitchen. Nyana leaned out and smiled at him.
Men like you always have fight.
Caine shook his head, closed the bathroom door, and stepped under the scalding hot water. A few minutes later, he was showered and seated at a tiny folding table they set up near the kitchen. Nyana had cooked a simple green curry, and the smells of cumin, ginger, and chicken wafted through the apartment. Somehow, the smells of Nyana's cooking transformed the small Spartan space into something else. To Caine, for the couple of hours she was there, the empty apartment became a home. Caine lifted the chopsticks to his mouth and devoured another bite of the spicy dish. He washed it down with a sip of cold beer from a frosted glass. "How's your brother doing?" he asked. Nyana made a clicking sound with her tongue.
Oh, Tavi? So much trouble, that one. He get into a fight today, too. Black eye.
A look of concern flashed across Caine's face, but Nyana smiled and shook her head.
Don't worry, nothing serious. Just boys being boys.
Caine looked up at her as he shoveled more food in his mouth. If you say so. Just make sure he keeps away from the street gangs. Nyana took a sip of beer and pushed at the food on her plate with her chopsticks.
He crazy, but not stupid. I tell him you won't be there to save him next time.
I didn't save him, Caine said. I just talked to some people. Made them see it was in their best interest to leave him alone. Caine smiled, but a dark glint flashed in his green eyes. Nyana smacked his hand.
Don't be so modest. You saved his life. I owe you.
Tavi was Nyana's younger brother, a street thief who sold tourists cheap trinkets and sometimes lifted their wallets in the process. He had run into trouble with the organized crime gangs that ran the area. Caine had used his connections and a few well-placed threats to straighten things out. After that, Nyana showed up at his door, offering to reward him the only way she knew how. He turned her down. He was lonely and she was beautiful.